Hello and welcome. Thanks for attending our sixth and final webinar in our Eat, Learn, Live, and Grow series, Keep on Growing, Garden Ideas for Indoors. I'm Larry Keyes, the webinar moderator. This presentation is to support the Eat, Learn, Live, and Grow program to guide educators through the process of successfully developing, growing, and sustaining school gardens, regardless of space, climate, or resources they have currently available. As part of the Eat, Learn, Live, and Grow School Garden program, we've been providing 6 garden-related webinars, an ongoing Facebook forum, and the Eat, Learn, Live, and Grow Garden Grant opportunity. I'd like to talk to you about our webinar sponsors, 2 wonderful organizations. Chartwells K-12 partners with more than 575 school districts ranging from large public institutions to small charter and private schools, and prides itself on delivering a unique food service experience for students rooted in what's important to each community. Chartwells K-12 is a culinary-focused organization with a mission to extend its passion, dedication, knowledge, and enthusiasm to serving each student delicious and nutritious meals. Chartwells brings to life its Eat, Learn, Live philosophy through partnerships like that with KidsGardening.org that bring more gardens to schools that support good nutrition, hands-on food and wellness education, and the building of lifelong healthy habits. It's not just about gardens for Chartwell schools, it's about gardens for all schools. And that's why the Eat, Learn, Live School Garden Guide, Grant, and Webinar series are available to all schools across the country. Kids Gardening has been a leading resource for school and youth gardening since 1982, providing garden grants, research, and curriculum. Kids Gardening creates opportunities for kids to learn through the garden, engaging their natural curiosity and wonder by providing inspiration, know-how, networking opportunities, and additional educational resources. They provide free lesson plans, activities, grant opportunities, and curriculum. About our webinar series, our 6-part webinar series discusses various topics which cover the fundamentals of launching and maintaining a school garden. We've been providing instructive and creative gardening tips, nutrition education materials, and guidance for building community garden support. We've added a Facebook forum for those who want to work interactively with us and to exchange ideas. As part of the program, we've created a private Facebook forum specifically to allow you to ask questions and chat with the folks at Chartwells and Kids Gardening about any aspect of school gardening and about our grant programs. We'll give you details and a link in that page later in the program. All of these programs have been recorded and are available on YouTube. So our agenda for today, we're joined by 2 of our favorite school gardening experts, Charlie Nardozzi and Sarah Pounders. After this couple of minutes of housekeeping, they'll spend about the next 40 minutes discussing topics related to indoor gardening to allow you to keep gardening all through the school year. And afterwards, Charlie and Sarah will also answer your questions during the last part of our webinar today. This is your chance to get your questions answered, questions that are specific to today's discussion, or also about school gardening in general. You can type your questions at any time during the webinar. To do so, click on the questions section of your GoToWebinar control panel. Type your question in the box. Or you can also send an email to our friend Amanda at amandas@KidsGardening.org with the address at the lower part there of your slide. We'll take as many questions as we can, and questions that we don't get to during the webinar we'll post on our Facebook forum. And now I'm going to introduce Charlie Nardozzi. Charlie is a nationally recognized garden writer, speaker, and radio and television personality. He's worked for more than 25 years bringing expert gardening information to home gardeners. Charlie delights in making gardening information simple, easy, fun, and accessible to everyone. His energy, exuberance, and love of the natural world make him a popular public speaker and presenter, and we're very, very pleased to have him with us today. We'd also like to mention that we're even more than usually pleased to have him today because Charlie is joining us from India, and it's about 2:00 a.m. local time for him. So if he nods off a little bit, That's perhaps why. We're also joined today with Sarah Pounders, who's been active in the field of youth gardening for over 20 years and has been an education specialist at Kids Gardening since 2005. She's coordinated numerous garden programs for children and conducted research on the benefits of using school gardens to teach nutrition curricula. She writes curricula and activities for youth of all ages and conducts both youth education programs and teacher training sessions on integrating gardens into the classroom. Sarah also enjoys gardening at home with her 2 young children and serves as the volunteer garden coordinator at her daughter's elementary school. So with Charlie in India and Sarah being in Texas, we think we've got much of the world covered for this particular webinar. I'm in the state of Vermont, so we're all over the place today. Charlie, I was going to ask you, what's the temperature where you are?
Oh, it's probably around 40 degrees. It's winter here. It doesn't
okay.
get too much colder than that.
So that's about, frankly, that's pretty much what it is around here, too. So,
yeah.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop off, but I'm going to sort of run the slides. We're all going to sort of try to coordinate this together, and we'll see how this all works. So the first thing we're going to do, I think, is we're going to run a poll. And Charlie, why don't you take it from here, and I'll be right behind you.
Yes, thanks, Larry. So, namaste and happy holidays. You see I have my appropriate hat on. I'm trying to hit all kinds of cultures here. But before we get started, we would love to find out how many of you, the attendees, actually currently garden indoors at your school. So if you can just take a second and check either yes or no. And our instant poll, our quick poll, will pop up the results for us. So it gives Sarah and I just an idea how many people have experience gardening indoors and how many are just newbies at it. Just getting going. So if you just take a minute to do that, and we'll get the results in a second or two, because it is a quick poll. Look at that. So 75% of you do not garden indoors. So because you're at the seminar, that is an indication to us that you want to. So this is a good place to be. So why don't we get started here and get started with the slides. So moving right along, why garden indoors? Why even want to do this? First of all, it extends the garden season. So a lot of the folks that come to our webinars, often they'll be in northern climates where by October, maybe November, it's kind of wrapping up. Now Sarah, of course, is one of the exceptions because she's in Texas, so she can speak to that and she'll jump in here and there.
It's actually getting cold today, so we're
it's getting what, 60 degrees?
Yeah, no, it's in the 40s. It's in the 40s, so.
Okay. So it's a good way to extend the garden season and keep that enthusiasm for gardening growing high, because a lot of times if you're wrapping it up in October, November, you don't get back into the garden until the spring. So to keep it kind of a continuum is nice. Provide some nice hands-on learning, and we'll talk a lot about that. Sarah actually will talk a lot about that when we talk about the GrowLab. And the GrowLab curriculum, award-winning curriculum Kids Gardening has had for a number of years. It's easy to integrate into that curriculum because you're doing things indoors. You're using a controlled environment. So you really can have those plants as part of what you're doing in the classroom. And on a very practical level, it gets projects done faster. You can get a jump start on the season so that you can get seeds and plants really kind of rolling so you're ready to hit the ground running when you want to be planting in the spring. So moving on. So the types of indoor gardens that we have. So I'm going to talk a little bit here at the beginning all about kind of seed starting and indoor gardens, using lights or not using lights, and go all through that. And then we'll jump in later with some of the other topics you saw on the agenda with microgreens, terrariums, indoor science experiments, plant propagation, all kinds of things of that nature. So let's talk about growing things either with lights or not lights. So one of the first options, of course, is to get a prefab grow light system. These, you'll see them all over the place in different catalogs. These are ones that have been put together professionally, have proper lighting on them, the ballasts, they have nice structures to them. If you can afford them, to be honest with you, it's probably a good thing to invest in because these can last for years and they're a great addition to the classroom. Now, if you're on a really tight budget, you can do a DIY grow light system. And this is as simple as going to a local home center like Home Depot or Lowe's, buying a ballast with some lights, and I'll talk about the different kinds of lights as we go along with this. And those you can set up pretty inexpensively in a classroom. And then, of course, if you're really low budget, you can just do Windowsill Gardens. If you're in the north, you're going to have a little bit of a disadvantage this time of year just because the days are shorter, light intensity is lower. But if you're in Texas, as Sarah has told me. They grow things, all kinds of things in the windowsill, right?
As long as the schools have windows in them, so
Yes, we do have
that's
to
a
assume
catch. Yeah.
that. So let's go through each one of these in a little more detail. So with the grow lights, having different kinds of grow lights, like I said, they provide the highest level of success. They, especially the professionally done, the prefab grow light systems, they really are geared for really growing things indoors and sometimes growing them to maturity depending on what you're growing. And you can do a lot of control of the environment with these prefab systems. You can control the light, the temperature, and the humidity, and we're going to show you how you do that in just a minute as we go through the different kinds of systems. And it gives you more planting options because of that. You can grow a lot of different kinds of plants now in one of these grow light systems. In a windowsill garden, you do have to make sure you're getting as much light as possible, especially now. If you're growing, if you're in Ohio or Minnesota or New York or any kind of northern climate, even Washington State, you're not going to get a lot of light this time of year. So you want to maximize it by putting the plants in a south or a west-facing window to get the most light possible, and realizing, too, that the temperatures are cooler near those windows in the winter, so that's going to affect plant growth. And of course, because of all this, you want to choose the low light plants like greens and house plants are going to do the best in a windowsill. So windowsills are not going to give you the best performance for your plants, but you can still do it effectively if that's the only option. So what kind of supplies are you going to need? Obviously, you're going to need pots. Pots with drainage holes. You can get some pots that are purchased, such as this peat pot that we show here, but a lot of the different kind of plastic pots. Or you can get repurposed pots. I know a lot of classrooms love to use milk cartons, yogurt containers, egg cartons. The thing you have to remember about these kinds of containers is they're pretty small celled, so you're not going to grow plants to maturity there. They're really best for growing plants for maybe a month or so until you can transplant them into something a little bit larger or bring them out into the ground. And then, of course, you need some potting soil, so a nice soilless potting mix that's really well drained. The lighter, the better. That's been my experience. And when you go to a garden center, you're going to see soilless mixes, potting mixes, seed starting mixes. It can get very confusing. Go with something that's very light. A seed starting mix is usually nice because it's been milled. It's very fine. The lighter, the better, because you want to have it really well drained so you don't run into some of the problems I'm going to talk about in a little bit. And of course, if you have well drainage, you're going to have catch that water, so you need some trays underneath it so you don't make a mess in the classroom.
Yes, don't forget that.
Yes, that's kind of important. Some other optional things that are really nice. For underneath the pots, not only trays, but moisture grids or capillary matting. So capillary matting, we're going to talk about this when we talk about making sure you can maintain this garden, indoor garden, through the weekends and through the holidays. That's a watering system, and I'll do that in more detail as we go along here and we talk about keeping those seedlings healthy. And of course, a timer is really important because you can't be there in the evening. You can't be there on the weekends. You don't want to be there over the holidays or over the school breaks. So if you can invest in a timer that will turn the lights on and off the right amount of time for those plants, that's going to be a really nice additional thing to have for an indoor garden supply. You can see from this GrowLab, which by the way is Sarah's GrowLab. It has a humidity tent on it. Humidity tents are great because not only do they keep the humidity high, which is a big issue, again, if in a northern area where it's cold, you'll get humidity levels indoors around 30%. If you have a humidity tent, you can maybe even double that. Keeps the humidity high so plants can grow really well in the tent. And actually it saves some of that moisture too so they don't dry out as fast. And spray bottles. You might not think about this, but think about a little seedling just kind of popping out of the soil, and you have like a watering can that you're trying to water it with. A lot of times with kids, they're going to put too much water on it, splashes all over the place, and it can even kill that seedling if they drench it. A spray bottle is a nice way to water it in a very gentle way and gives them a little exercise for their wrists. How about that? And Sarah, we're going to jump. I was going to say one more thing there if you can go back. Just
sorry about that.
That's okay. It takes a little difference of time here between Vermont and India. So Sarah, this is your GrowLab, and what do you have in there? What's that little circular thing that's there?
That was a butterfly cage. We brought in a few monarch caterpillars to watch them eat and poop all over the place. So watch them grow in there for a while. So turned out to be a very interesting experiment. Good observation opportunities.
So you can use GrowLabs to grow not just plants but insects too.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Okay, now we can move along there. So where to start? What kind of things are going to grow best in your Grow Lab? Now, I'm going to list some of the things here, but Sarah can talk about a handout we have when I get to the end of this that goes into more detail about each one of the different vegetables, flowers, and herbs. So greens are obviously one of the best things to grow because you don't have to wait for them to mature. So it could be everything from arugula to lettuce to spinach to kale to Swiss chard. You can be picking those greens as soon as they literally almost come out of the ground, but usually you want to wait a little bit longer, and you have a nice rewarding crop to grow. If you want to grow something that's fruiting, the classic is the bush bean. We've all done it. They probably still do it in science classes where you get a bean, you put it in a cup, you let it grow out. Beans are really forgiving plants, so you can put them in a windowsill or in a grow light system, and chances are you're going to get at least a few beans. Root crops are nice to grow, again, because they're a low light crop. So you can actually get away with planting these in a grow lab or maybe even a windowsill. Radishes are really good. Carrots and beets are going to take a little bit longer than normal, and you're going to have to get varieties like Thumbelina carrot or Little Fingers carrot that are small. You don't want a long imperator type, so it's going to be so big it won't fit in a pot, or baby beets. So you just have to kind of keep that in mind, be a little selective about the varieties. And then there are edible flowers that are fun. Marigolds, calendula, nasturtiums. Things like nasturtiums, you can eat the leaves too. So even if you don't get to the flowering stage, it's still something that would be a nice educational component. And then finally, there are herbs. And there's lots of different kinds of herbs that will grow well. Low light herbs like parsley and chives do really well. But even oregano and thyme you can grow as a perennial that you can bring in and then bring back out. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about plant propagation as we go along. And Sarah, you want to mention something about that handout that we have for people as far as what to grow?
We do. We have a handout that is from the appendix of one of our Grow Lab books that has some recommended indoor plants. And I think we're going to be getting that added on. I don't see it just yet, but we will work on getting that to everyone so that you can get some ideas. It includes some varieties, like Charlie was mentioning. When you're doing indoor plants, the varieties you choose are so important. So
Yes,
you
exactly.
want to have the most success possible. So set yourself up for the best you can. So.
Right, and all this information will be on the Facebook page and the webinar series page on Kids Gardening as well. Talking about seeds, let's kind of move on to different kinds of seeds. What do seeds need? We'll talk about seeds first. First of all, they need water and warmth. That's the two main things to get them to germinate. You want to make sure you're planting in moist soil so that it stays consistently moist. That's really important because if you get your soil moist when you first put the seed in and then you go away for 4 or 5 days and forget to water, that seed is going to start the germination process. And if it starts the germination process and then dries out, it dies. It does not grow. So if seeds are not coming up at the right time, that might be one of the things that might be happening. I love these heating mats. There's a picture of it right there. It's a seedling heat mat, you see. They're great because they'll keep the temperature warm enough for seeds to germinate fastest. And the most important thing to do is have a seed that germinates fastest as possible. That way you avoid a lot of different kinds of fungal problems and problems with the seed not growing or germinating well. So the seedling mats will keep temperatures around 70 degrees, and even seeds like peas, for example, which you think of are a cool season crop, they actually germinate better at a higher temperature. So again, another kind of item that might be worth investing in. Now, I know, Sarah, you said you get questions sometimes about people asking about other ways to keep the seeds warm.
Yes, I've gotten the question about like heating mats. I mean, heating pads like you put on your back. And
Right.
I've told people to avoid those because they're not designed to be around water. So we stick with the ones that are designed specifically to be around the
Yeah,
house.
you don't want things shorting out. And you don't want to put it on a radiator either if you have that kind of system in your school. So a seedling mat is a nice investment. Spray bottles we talked about before, and of course all of this keeps kind of the temperatures in that 65 to 70 degree range, which is perfect for seed germination. And next slide, there we go. We're talking about lights. So most people don't realize, especially newbies to indoor gardening, that most seeds don't need light to germinate. So you can put your seeds in trays, you can put them in black plastic bags to keep the soil nice and moist, and just put them off in a warm spot. Once they do germinate though, so you have to really watch those seeds, then they need the light to keep them growing strong, because if you don't really catch them early with the lighting, and you'll see from the next point that Larry's putting up.
Oops, sorry about that. There we go.
Larry, what are you going out for a croissant? What are you doing?
Oh,
Okay. So you need good light to keep them, the early growth growing. You want to make sure they don't get leggy, and the legginess will happen right at that seedling stage when they come out of the ground. If they don't have the lights right close to them, they can very easily get leggy, and once they start leggy, they continue being leggy their whole life. So it's really important to make sure if you're not putting them under the lights as they start to germinate, that you have those lights ready to go when they first come out of the ground.
And can I add something, Charlie, to that? Because this
Yep.
is something we experienced. If you have seeds that are growing at different, try to group your seeds into ones that are going to germinate about the same time, because you'll have to move the lights up. And because we had the problem where some of our seeds were slower, and we had to move the lights up for some of the other plants that had already started growing, and then we ended up with this leggy problem that you're talking about, because the ones that germinated later, we should have had them on different shelves because of that. So.
Yes, that's a great point. Getting the right size plants together, mixing them together so you can keep, because the lights are obviously a linear plane, so you can't stagger them. Okay, moving on there. So let's talk about seedlings. Once things are growing up, what kinds of things they need? Obviously, water, heat, light, fertilizer. We'll talk a little bit about some room. And I put this little link up here. And again, this whole webinar is going to be on the Facebook page and webinar series page. An extension website from Minnesota that has a lot of the detailed information about starting seeds indoors. So let's kind of go through these aspects one at a time. Larry?
Yep.
There you are.
Remember, you're in India. I'm here.
Oh, right. That's right.
Sorry
There's a
about
delay. We get so demanding of these things. A couple-second delay. It's only how many thousand miles? All right. So when you're watering, you want to keep it moist but not too wet. That's really kind of a very key thing with watering. The seed starting medium should have the dampness of a wrung out sponge. So if you actually grab it with your hand, if you squeeze it and you get water coming out of your hand, it's too wet. You should have a nice dampness to it. And for that reason, these self-watering trays are important. And that's why I kind of go back to that earlier slide where you're talking about capillary mats. And these self-watering trays usually have a capillary mat underneath them so that the water and a water reservoir. So the part of the mat is in the reservoir. It soaks the water up through the mat right underneath those the pots, so it keeps the moisture very consistent. It's a great thing to have, and it's a really important thing to have, especially in schools where you're not there on the weekends or school holidays and vacations, to make sure that moisture is there consistently. You can increase the humidity, and Sarah's nice example of a humidity tent on our GrowLab is a great way to do that. And these self-watering trays help too, because some of that water evaporates. And these are all great tips for weekends and breaks. So having a timer, having self-watering trays, having a humidity tent, all the kinds of things that are really worth investing in to make sure that those plants survive. So when the kids come back from the school break, they don't see plants that don't look so healthy.
Yeah.
That's not a good thing.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
The heat, like we said, 60 to 80 degrees is optimal for the soil and for the air too. So keep that in mind if you're in the north and you have you're growing things near a window. Even if you have the GrowLab near a window, there's really no need to have the GrowLab near the window, by the way, because it has its own light. You might want to put it into a warmer spot in that classroom because the heat can vary. During the day, at night, a lot of times schools will turn the heat way down at night and on the weekends, and that cool temperatures will actually slow the growth of the plants down. So that can work to your advantage if you're growing things like a tomato, for example, and you started a little too early, and it's April in Pennsylvania, and it's not time to put them out into the soil. You can actually put them in a cooler spot, same kind of light, but a cooler spot in the classroom, so it slows them down, so you can put them out at the right time for that plant. And the lights that we talked about, so we talked about the prefab lights, and you can get the grow lights that are full spectrum lights, and these are the small ones. They come under names like T5 and T8 and T12. They're small lights that fit in the ballast. I like having at least 4 lights in that ballast. You'll see some of them that are just 2, and the 2 usually has too much shadowing going on, so you don't get even growth. If you have at least 4 lights, you're going to get nice even growth in there. Now, if you wanted to just do your own DIY, with these grow lights, you can go to a garden center or go to a home center and get those cool whites. That's what you want to look for, is the cool whites. The cool whites are good for seedling growth and good for growth for plants for about a month or so, 6 weeks or so. Beyond that, when plants start getting close into the flowering stage, then you're going to need the warm red light. So you can do a mix of the warm red and the cool whites if you want to actually try to grow things to maturity, but chances are it's better just to use the warm lights or to get the full spectrum bulbs. Like I said, 4 bulbs minimum, and then the height of the bulb. So with seedlings, we talked about having them literally a couple inches and then moving them above the plants and then moving them as you go along. If you're growing things like African violets or begonias or impatiens, you can keep them a foot above the plants, and that's fine. Or if you're doing some of the house plants that Sarah's going to mention a little bit later, you can even be a couple feet above them because they like that dappled light. And the duration of the light needs to be about 14 hours, 14 to 16 hours a day. That's why the timer is important. The plants need to have a dark period. They need to have a rest period. So make sure that you have a timer set so that it'll run maybe during the day, and then at night when it's dark in the classroom and everywhere else, the plants can get a little bit of a rest. And the next slide. So different nutrients, different between seeds and seedlings, of course, is that there's often not going to be nutrients in that soil mix. You're going to have to actually mix some things in. Now, you're going to get some mixes, they'll say they have fertilizer added. I tend to stay away from those because those fertilizers tend to be chemical and they tend to really boost plants, sometimes grow too fast beyond the environment that they're in. If they don't have enough light or enough warmth, they may not grow very well. It's better to use water-soluble liquid fertilizers that every time you water, you're adding a little bit of fertilizer to help the plants grow along. And I like organic fertilizers like kelp or compost tea or worm poop tea, which is a really nice one. Those are nice because they're organic. The plants grow really well. They can take up those nutrients as they need them. And the key is they don't smell. Don't do what I did, which is use fish emulsion once indoors. Have you ever done that, Sarah?
I've spilled a container of it before.
Oh, yes, right.
It's a
if you know what fish emulsion, yeah, it says deodorized. Don't believe it. So don't use fish emulsion indoors unless you want your whole school to smell like fish. And then some common pest problems that we're going to have. Fungus gnats. So this is going to be more of a problem if you're growing plants like house plants or more perennial plants where you have soil that's been there for a while. Fungus gnats are those little black things, the little black flies you'll see kind of flying around, usually in the winter. They're not really going to hurt you. They're not going to bite you or the kids. And what they do is they have a little larvae that's in the soil itself. And then that larvae hatches. It starts feeding on the organic matter in the soil, and then it pupates and goes into the adult stage is that little black gnat. So it doesn't really harm the plant so much, and it doesn't harm you, but it's a nuisance. And if you have the principal coming in to look at the great GrowLab setup that you have there, and there's these flies all over the place, it's not going to be very good. A couple things you could do with those fungus gnats. First thing is, of course, you can repot the plant and get fresh potting soil. That will help. You can put a layer of sand over the soil. That will prevent the adult fly from laying eggs, so you can break that cycle. You can use sticky cards that you can put on there so that you can catch those black flies as they're flying around. And there's an organic product called Natrol, G-N-A-T-R-O-L, that you can drench the soil with and kill them. A bigger problem, though, especially with seedlings, is fungal soil issues. Damping off is a disease you're going to run into. Now, damping off is when you look at the little seedling and you can look at the actual stem of that seedling and you see it's literally rotted and the whole thing will just flop over. This can happen overnight. And what a lot of times will happen if you have too wet of the soil conditions, and that's really the main cause of it, is that it'll get started and it can go through a tray of seedlings in a day or so. Really quickly kill your plants. So what are you going to do if you have damping off? So if you see that you have too much moisture in there, you want to make sure that you can dry that out pretty quickly. If it's started already, you want to pull out any of those plants that have that damping off seedlings, pull them out of there and get rid of them and maybe just start over. If it's one end of it has it and the other end of your tray doesn't, if you can stop it, you might be able to save the rest of those seedlings. So it's always important to start with clean soil so you don't get any of these kind of diseases, and make sure the watering, like I said, is key. You don't want to have really soppy water. You want to be like the wrung-out sponge. And start with pest-free plants, too. That's always important, especially if you're bringing plants into the classroom. So what else can you grow indoors? I kind of gave you a rough thing on seeds and seedlings. Like I said, we'll have a handout for more information. There's that website I mentioned. We're going to talk a little bit about microgreens, which is a fun thing to do, very popular now, not only in classrooms, but for home gardeners. Sarah's going to jump in and lead the discussion on terrariums, and then we'll move into some of the other areas like grocery store botany. This is fun. This is growing all kinds of plants that you can take from the grocery store and propagate them. We're going to talk very briefly on hydroponics. That's a whole other subject we can cover in another webinar, and some great indoor science experiments based on that GrowLab curriculum that I talked about. So let me just go quickly through microgreens, and I will hand it off to Sarah to talk about the rest of these great things. So microgreens, you probably have seen these, and I want to first of all define microgreens. You'll see often sprouts and microgreens kind of talked about in the same way, and they're really different things. Sprouts are something that you will grow in water, or at least in moisture. So you put the seeds in a jar, you rinse them twice a day, they start germinating, and once they've germinated, then you maybe leave them out in the light to get a little green, but then you eat them. There is no soil, no substrata involved at all in those. Microgreens are a little bit different. Microgreens you will be growing in a soilless mix, coir, peat moss, some kind of soilless mix, and you're going to be growing them beyond the seedling stage or the cotyledon stage to the actual true leaf stage. So it's a little bit different than the sprouts. The nice thing about microgreens is they're safer. You know, you've probably heard a lot of stories about sprouts sometimes getting E. coli. Even professional growers have this issue with those. And you certainly don't want to deal with the potential of that in a classroom. Microgreens will not have that issue because you're growing them not just in water, but in some kind of soilless medium. They're easy to grow, they're nutritious, they're actually jam-packed with nutrients, and if you go to the finer restaurants, you'll see a beautiful little menu where you'll have maybe your salmon or something, and then you have a few microgreens scattered around it. It's very popular, very chic, but it's also very great for kids, and you can grow them right through the winter. We'll talk about the lighting needs of those in a minute. Moving on to the next slide. So for the microgreens, like I said, you need some kind of substratum. It could be a soilless mix, it could be peat moss, it could be coir, it could be any kind of material that you'll have in there, and you want to have a tray. Now these trays, you can see from this image here, they can be like a little Tupperware container, they could be an old salad container. Ideally they'll have a few holes in them, so you want to have something to catch the moisture underneath them, but really I've done it where you don't even have holes in them because they're not really growing these very long. You're growing them for a week or two and then you'll be done with them. So as long as you don't overwater too much, you can actually grow them in almost any kind of medium. Whether they need light or not, ideally you want to have maybe about 4 hours of light for them. Once they've germinated, start growing, that helps them green up. You want to get them to that, what we call the true leaf stage. So the first 2 leaves are the cotyledons, the seedling leaves. The next 2 are the true leaf stage. That's the stage you want to get them to. At that point, that's when you harvest. And if you're growing things like kale or arugula, it could be in a week you're doing this. If you're growing things like peas, it might be 2 or 3 weeks. And when you harvest, you just snip them off with your scissors and you throw them in your salad or just eat them. It's really easy to do. The thing with those is that you can do succession planting too. So you can have a tray going and then you'd be snipping that and eating it, and you have another tray growing right by its side. So you can literally have these microgreens growing right through the winter, having kids doing experiments with them and eating them as part of their lunch and just kind of playing around with them. So it's really a fun way to get kids involved and having something edible indoors when normally you're not going to have anything. So now I want to pass over to Sarah. She's going to lead the discussion about terrariums and some of these other things.
So, yeah, so some other ideas that you can do in your classroom to incorporate it in. Terrariums are one of my favorites. I've always enjoyed making terrariums, and they're actually very simple to do. I have one of our terrariums here that we made. This thing has been closed in for a year now, and the plants are still growing, and it hasn't been opened. The plants haven't been watered yet. So, but all you need for a terrarium, there's really 2 kinds. You can have one that's completely closed, like the one that I have, and some of the pots that you'll see nowadays are just kind of semi-enclosed, so it might have a small hole in them, so those you'll have to water somewhat more. But either way, it increases humidity. The plants are kind of in their own little world, so you can use all different kinds of things for containers. You don't have to buy a specific terrarium container. This one that I had was an animal cracker container that was left over. I've used pretzel containers, I've used cheese puff containers. You can also use old aquariums. I'm trying to think and of course soda bottles. The picture down there at the bottom is one that's very popular because it's inexpensive. You can use it, basically the one that's shown as an example is 2 bottles because you cut the bottom off of one to make the top of another. So, but lots of very simple ingredients here. You just need, for the base that kind of mimics a bedrock, you use some rocks, which usually is just pea gravel. And you can also sprinkle in a little bit of aquarium charcoal that's supposed to help decrease any kind of smell that there might be. I never use charcoal and mine work just fine. And I always rinse those rocks. Oh, the first thing on the container, let me also mention, always make sure your container is very clean before you use it. Use some kind of soap because especially if you're using, like I usually use food containers, so that can you want to make sure it's all clean before you do that clean.
You can
So
have a mold experiment going.
yes, you will. You can have a mold experiment instead. So then a layer of rocks, which I usually rinse off too. You probably don't need to. But then the next layer is your soil. You once again just use the same kind of potting soil that you would use. Usually something a little bit heavier than your seed starting material is fine. So just a soilless mix. I usually always start with new, fresh soil. You want to start with, it's just like Charlie was mentioning, you start with the cleanest soil, cleanest plants you can with a terrarium because it's enclosed. So if there are any problems in the soil or the plants, it's going to show up really well. It's going to create this nice humid environment for any kind of mold or fungus. So start with good potting soil, and you don't need much, so it doesn't have to be very expensive. It's just you want to put, I think that I have about 3 inches right here for my example. And then we have plants, and you're going to use different kinds of house plants for your terrarium or optimal. And on our website, KidsGardening.org, under activities, you will find the whole terrarium activity is listed on there, and it has a long list of plants that are good. Some of the ones that I commonly find in the stores and use are a nerve plant, which I'll show you my nerve plant here. This is my mother plant that I use to get other plants from. You can, when you buy them in the store in the containers, there's actually usually multiple plants growing in each pot. So if you're thinking if you have a whole classroom, how can you afford to do it for everyone? There's actually multiple plants. And you can also start with cuttings because you have this nice humid environment, and we're going to get to cuttings in a minute. So just because that's one of the things that I always find is people think it's going to be very expensive. African violets are good. What's in this container is a small peace lily. So, and there's a number of other things listed on there. And so then you just also add fun additions to your terrarium. My kids wanted to add a little frog to theirs. We used to have a really big globe, and we had a little mirror that had a swan floating around on it. Just something that, kind of get the kids to keep coming back and looking and checking on it. So those are just kind of, the terrariums are fun and they're easy. You don't need a lot of light. They have houseplants in them. So if you do have a windowsill garden, this is something that's a good option for you to start out with, especially if you're just getting into it. Keeps the high humidity, keeps the plants growing. So it's a good fun starting point, I think, our terrariums. So, and then next up, we will talk about plant part propagation. So Charlie talked all about seeds and looking at what's called sexual propagation because it's all about seeds. So plants are really cool because you can get new plants by cutting off pieces of existing plants and starting new plants from that. So that's kind of a fun thing to share with kids, is how plants are kind of different and that you can cut off a small piece of a plant and start a whole new plant. So they have a whole different way of getting new plants. So there are a couple different options. You can do root, stem, and leaf cuttings. So stem are probably the most common of any of them. So basically all you do, and my nerve plant is a great example of something that's easy to propagate from stems. So you would take a small, and you would usually use scissors, but you can use your finger. So you would take a small cutting of your house plant or that you are kind of grow. Herbs are also really great for starting stem cuttings. You cut off some of these bottom leaves because you don't want the bottom leaves, and then I'm just gonna stick that into a pot of soil. Make sure it has high humidity, and once again, start with clean soil, clean and moist soil, and stick it in there, and it will actually, you can already tell on this, there's already air roots growing on this one. It's already to start to be a new plant. So it's very easy. You can start all new plants that way. So, and your house plants and your herbs, like I said, are really good options for that. So you place them in the moist soil, and some of them also propagate really well in water. I know at our school we have a coleus plant that was really beautiful this year, so we're going to take cuttings. We can just stick that in a vase of water, and it'll root right up. And you eventually do need to repot it into soil so that we can keep it over the winter and have it again for the spring. But they're a great way to start new plants and to allow kids to see that. Just make sure that you maintain the humidity on those. So, because you've just removed all its roots, so it needs a little extra help. So here's a fun experiment that's, or lesson plan / experiment that's in our GrowLab book. It's called Plantenstein. And what you do here is actually you create little trays, and you do allow kids to choose different plants to propagate. Most of these that are in the example are a leaf. You could also, I mean, are stem cuttings. And I forgot to mention, you can also, there are a number of plants where you can just cut off the leaf and actually put the leaf in and get a new plant, or roots, have root cuttings. And such as a sweet potato, and it'll start a new plant. So sorry, I forgot to mention that. So herbs, for this activity, herbs and houseplants are great, and they make a little face from all the different parts. And you can see that one that's kind of the biggest. It has spider plant eyes, coleus ears, an onion set for the nose, and a jade plant for a tongue. Jade plant's one where it's actually a leaf cutting versus a stem cutting. So lots of fun. See what grows, and also create a little story. They could create a little story to go with it about their person. They can name it. Then they can watch it grow, see what grows best. There's all sorts of different experiments you can do with that. So, and the next take on that, and it's similar, but taking it one step further, is grocery store botany. So this is actually getting things from the grocery store. So you kind of helps you bring in the nutrition aspect, fruits and vegetable aspect, and you actually propagate from the things that you got from the grocery store. So it's very practical. Kids really feel a connection to it. They can even bring in stuff that they ate during their lunch and encourage them to eat their fruits and vegetables, or bring in something from home so they get more involved. And first thing you can do is you can do some seeds from the grocery store, such as orange seeds are one thing you can start with. Those are considered smaller seeds. My son did a pumpkin. Here's our pumpkin that's growing in our grow lab right now that was left over from Halloween. He planted his Halloween seeds. I don't know how long we'll be able to keep that alive in our grow lab, but we're going to see what we can do. You can also do bigger seeds, and there was a picture previously of an avocado, and I think we're going to mention it again in a minute, so I'll cut through that quickly for right now. Then you can also do stem cuttings and divisions, and also roots. So, and we'll talk about slips with sweet potatoes. So we'll kind of look at these in more detail here. So here's your big seed, your avocado. Those are always fun to watch, because you can put it in soil. I actually, when I've done you save your avocado seed and maybe you do an experiment where you get to make some guacamole, so make it a little party to start out with.
That's always fun.
You wash it off, let it dry out just a little bit, and you can plant it in a pot of soil. And I usually have better luck with that. But you can also do this cool experiment where you can put toothpicks and just place it in a cup of water, and you just want the very bottom to be touching water. You don't want it immersed in water, because then it'll get too wet. And then but it will actually sprout. It'll send down a root and a shoot, and they get to see the whole process because there's no soil in the way. So that's the cool thing about doing it this way versus putting in soil, is they get to see, you can really see the detail on everything. So that's a lot of fun to watch.
But
so
unfortunately, you won't get avocados, though, in most cases.
No, not even
Just
in
so you
Houston.
people know.
Not even in Houston. So that's true. So you gotta
It's a
go
beautiful houseplant.
Right. Thank you for mentioning that. It's true. So also some things that you can find in the grocery store where you can demonstrate stem cuttings. This picture is from rosemary. If you go to the herb section, you can often find like fresh rosemary that's just been recently cut that you can propagate. In our grocery store, a lot of times you'll see fresh basil that's just been recently cut that will also grow roots for you. And so those are the two main ones that I see. And moving on to the next one, let's see, what do we have? Okay, and another type of propagation that was not seed, and I hadn't mentioned yet, in addition to cuttings, you can also do division, which is basically these plants, they start growing in a big clump, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually they get crowded and they need to make more space anyways. So you can also divide your herbs that were outside, for example, and you can create new plants. Or you can purchase one, but this right here is chives. It's an example of something you can divide and then pot up and bring them inside for the winter to watch and grow, and then you can return them back outside again once the season gets better. So that's another option for you. And another really fun activity, grocery store botany, is to regrow your carrots. So you cut off your carrot top. Leave about an inch of the orange or whatever color. This is a beautiful rainbow color. Usually they're orange, the orange top, and then cut all the leaves, not all the way down to the bottom. So just kind of cut the green just so that there's just a little bit left. And you place that in a shallow tray of water. Not, it doesn't have to be a ton of water, just a shallow tray, and it actually will re-sprout the top growth. And so that's a lot of fun for kids to watch, is especially since that's the part you're usually not eating anyways. So you cut it off, and it's like you get to, and it's another good windowsill kind of activity. You don't have to have a grow lab for it. So it's to watch it re-sprout the green growth. And some
Yeah.
of the other root crops will already also work.
Yeah, and even pineapple. I don't know if you've tried
Oh,
pineapple
yes.
before, but yeah, you can cut the top of a pineapple off. I know a lot of times in the winter that's a popular fruit, and you can get that to grow, which is kind of really exotic for kids.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. I almost slipped past that one. Yes, that is a lot of fun, and you can actually, it will grow indoors, and you can put it outside once it warms up again. But yeah, it will regrow
But
roots
like the
for you.
avocado, you probably won't get a pineapple.
Maybe if I think you'd have a better shot at getting a pineapple than you would an
Than the
avocado. So
avocado.
I think you
Okay.
could grow it out, and it would take a good, I think it's 18 months, I believe, to go.
Yes,
If you
right.
can keep it alive and happy for 18 months, you might get another pineapple. So long-term project. So
Right.
another grocery store botany kind of thing is to regrow sweet potatoes. This is sweet potato. Just stick it right in a glass as is. Has a little water available to it. It will grow roots and grow shoots. A fun little fact here: sweet potatoes are true roots. If you're a botany fan, an Irish potato is actually a type of stem. It's a modified stem. So it also will regrow for you, but it's just something fun to kind of stump people on because everyone thinks that an Irish potato is a root because it's underground, but it's actually a modified stem. And that's just another thing that's easy to get at the grocery store that you can get a plant out of and have fun to watch. So. All right. Now one other thing that we don't have a slide on. I was just going to mention bulbs,
Mhm.
onions, garlic. Those are also things that are underground storage units that you can look at and get to grow. If you leave an onion in your refrigerator for too long and you cut it in half, you'll notice that it's already started growing sometimes. So
Right.
bulbs are another fun thing that you can get from the grocery store to eat. Now we're kind of running out of time, so I'm just going to basically just briefly mention hydroponics. You can get hydroponics is basically growing plants. Usually you grow the soil in most plants. It provides all the nutrients and the water that your plant needs. So with hydroponics, you actually are getting those nutrients from water. So they still have something, as you can see from these pictures, the plants still have something to help with the structure to hold them in place, but all the nutrients they're getting is from water that you're using. And there are systems that you can buy that are already put together and you can use that, or there's some do-it-yourself kind of things that you can also do. We have a classroom hydroponics guide that we hope to have up soon, but just something that just keep in mind. And like I said, it's a very long topic, and so if anyone's interested, they can to email me, and I'll get some more details to you. But we'll have to save all the details for a later time. So because I want to get into the Grow Labs are a great place to do science experiments because you have it available in your classroom. They see it all the time. They walk by it. You don't have to go outside to do it. You don't have to schedule special time. They can do it just like while they're waiting for lunch, or if they get done with their activities early, they can come and check it out. So a lot of experiments to track plant growth, test germination rates, look at daily observation of change. So there's a lot of cool ways to use that, and it's right there in your classroom. Um, so we'll switch over, and to help you do this, we have developed and this was developed in about 20 years ago, was the Grow Lab Activity Guide, and has some really great key garden-related activities so that you can learn all about plant life cycles, plant diversity, investigate all the different parts of the plant and how they work and the importance. And it has specific activities that you can do indoors in either a windowsill garden or your grow light. So that's kind of different. And some of them you can also do outdoors too. So it has 45 lessons and additional extension ideas for all of them. And it was specifically developed to help those northern folks who needed something to do in a garden and had such a short growing season. And in addition to that, here's some of the activities. I kind of don't have time to run through all of them, but these are the activities that we're going to post for you guys later as PDF files. Yo Seeds Wake Up is all about looking at germination rates and comparing germination rates, changing different factors to see if they germinate better. Then we also have another one. One of my favorite activities to do is called, it's from Make Room for Ratty, and you plant different number of radish seeds in pots, and then you can grow them out because they grow fairly quickly, about 30 days or a little bit more when you're growing them inside, and you can see how that affects the size. So you have a pot with 1 in it, then you have another pot with 5, then you have a pot with 50, and then you can grow to see how big they get. You can weigh them and see the difference, and it's great about you know, plant needs and also overcrowding and that kind of thing. So, and like I said, we'll have these available for you to see as a PDF as examples.
Mm-hmm.
And so we also, in addition to the activity guide, there's also a complete guide, which all of the information that we've talked about today is pretty much in this GrowLab complete guide. It's all of what you need to know to grow inside, planting ideas, step-by-step, troubleshooting, growing basics, care and maintenance ideas, the supplies you need. So everything we've talked about today in writing. So, and that's our complete guide.
If I could chime in, Sarah, does this not also include a do-it-yourself sort of design? In case you don't want to purchase a GrowLab, it also has a design to make your own.
There is a design at the back for a potential do-it-yourself GrowLab. Mm-hmm.
Right, and these GrowLab guides and curriculums are available through Kids Gardening, and we'll put a link up there about those too.
Yep. Oh, we're almost done here. So we do have a couple of questions.
Aren't we?
Let me come back. That was terrific. Thanks, everyone, for all the information. And in a couple of minutes, we'll pass along some questions that we've accumulated during the presentation. So feel free to put in additional questions in the questions box. And if your question isn't answered today, join the Eat, Learn, Live, and Grow Facebook forum, integrating the school garden and I'm sorry, that's the wrong forum. That's the forum, the previous one. But we'll answer all your remaining questions and any other questions that arise after this webinar. So I'm just going to go ahead here. One of the questions is sort of a burning question that came up was, can you recut your microgreens?
Oh, well, unfortunately not. So you're growing these in this substratum of soilless mix or peat or coir, whatever it is. They grow up, like I said, to the true leaf stage. Then you snip them off right at the soil line and you eat them. Of course, when you do that, that's the end of that seedling. So really we're talking about creating trays where you can just kind of snip what you need. Once you've snipped the whole tray, then you can compost that. And that's what I was mentioning when I talked about microgreens. They have succession planting, meaning that you have trays going maybe every week or two so that you continually have new seedlings coming up and so that you can keep them going. But they will not regrow, no.
Interesting, okay. Is it okay to use seeds with old packing dates?
Well, that's a good question. So, you know, you'll see expiration dates on your seeds oftentimes, and sometimes even this time of year, you go to a garden center, they'll have the old seeds still for sale at super reduced prices, 50% off. A lot of times that's okay. For most seeds, they'll still germinate okay. There are certain ones, onions, for example, don't really last very long as far as the longevity of the seed. But most other seeds can last a number of years. So what you can do, which would be a fun experiment to kind of combine it back into the classroom, is to do a seed germination test. And I think we talked about this probably on a previous webinar that we have, and of course the whole webinar series is on that Facebook page if you want to spend an evening with us going through all 6 of them. But with seed germination test, what you do is you put maybe 10 seeds in a moistened paper towel in a plastic bag, put it in a warm spot, and see how many seeds of those germinate. If only 3 of them germinate, then you know those are old seeds that probably are not worthwhile trying to plant in your GrowLab or your light system or even use as microgreens. But if you get 7 or 8 of the 10, that means you've got a 70 to 80% germination rate, which is probably kind of my threshold. If I can get 8 or so to germinate, then I think they're probably still good seeds to use. So if you have old seed, you know, left over from a year or 2 ago, you can do the germination test, see how viable they are, and then try them out. Even if you only get 30 or 40% germination, instead of just throwing all those seeds out, just sow them really thickly when you do the microgreens. And so you may not get as full a stand, but you're at least not wasting that seed. You're getting some benefit from it.
I can say that we did some older seeds for sunflowers this year. I think they were 2 years old, and they came on like gangbusters. So
yeah,
they did work pretty well.
Right, and if you store them properly too, in a cool, dark place, in a
Yeah,
glass jar, plastic, something like that, so we're not getting any moisture in them, and it's cool temperatures, they will last a number of years.
cool. Very good. Okay, we've got another question. Are any of the curriculum activity suggestions designed for preschoolers?
Um, the ones that we mentioned, the GrowLab, is for K through 8, right? Is what it's listed at. So, but the only thing is that many of them you could take down to different levels, depending. Like I said, they all have like a main activity, and then they have extensions, and they're very easy to adapt, I think, for younger kids. On our website, the KidsGardening.org website, you'll also find 2 books that were specifically written for the preschool age, Sowing the Seeds of Wonder and Garden Adventures, and they both have some activities that you could do indoors or outdoors with the garden. So if you're looking for very like on the very younger scale of the pre-K scale, both of those 2 books were written for the 3 to 5 or 3 to maybe the K range. So, but I think the Grow Labs are very adaptable too. But the Sowing Seeds of Wonder and Garden Adventures were the 2 pre-K curriculum that we have.
And how can folks
Great.
order the GrowLab books?
Well, all of the books are on our website. If you go to kidsgardening.org and you look under educator resources, you'll see a spot for books and publications, and you can go there to find out more information about them. When you click through, you're actually getting those from Gardner Supply Company. It's the actual distributor of the different books. And as you'll note from our website, for schools that are purchasing through Gardner Supply Company, you can get a school discount of 25%. So that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at the books, or even if you're looking at grow lights, that's all applicable. So just make sure on our website there's specific contact information about getting that school discount.
Very good. Well, I think we've run out of time and we've run out of webinars, which is sort of
Oh,
sad because we've had such a great time doing this. This is our 6th webinar that we've done. I hope you've learned a few things and enjoyed your time with us. The webinar has been recorded and it will be available in all its glory to you at the Kids Gardening website or on our Facebook forum. And remember that the handouts for today's session are supposed to be in the GoToMeeting toolbar, but if they're not, we'll also post those on our website. The PowerPoint slide deck for the presentation is also available. Please visit our Facebook forum at facebook.com/groups/eat.learn.live-and-grow to ask other questions that you have, and to sign up, hopefully, for our subsequent webinars in 2017. And also, you can also access the recorded webinars there. And Sarah and Charlie will be hanging out there as well, so you can ask them questions too. This final slide, I showed the links for our Facebook forum. Also for our previous webinars, the links are also available on the KidsGardening.org website. And of course, we want to provide a link to the Chartwells Eat, Learn, Live program, which is also linked there on that page. On behalf of Chartwells and Kids Gardening, we'd like to thank you for attending our webinars, and we're looking forward to further conversations in the new year and your next growing season. Happy holidays, happy gardening. Thanks for watching. Thank you very much.
bye.
Bye.